Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Paranormal Stories. First up we have Coexisting by Mindless Piccolo 303. I, 31 and female, moved out of my parents' home at the age of 18. We moved into this home in Colorado, right across the street from a graveyard when I was 9. Lived there all those years, and my parents still live there to this day. It's a single-leveled home, 3 bedrooms. My room was, in a sense, smaller than my siblings' room, as they shared a bedroom. The vibe in my room was always off. It was like it was never my room. And I know that sounds crazy, but no matter how much I decorated it to make it mine, it never felt like mine. The room would randomly get cold, and things would just always fall, or be in a place I never put it in. Of course, as the older sibling, the younger ones were to blame. But as time moved on, I would wake up to the feeling of someone watching, something there. I would often wake up to messes in my room. One evening, I was called for dinner, and as I was walking out of my room, I glanced at my big mirror, and I had to do a double take because I saw a face in the mirror that was clearly in my closet. To me, it looked like a male child. It was like after he physically made himself known, he just didn't care. He was there. He was going to make it known. My parents thought I was crazy and just straight up lost my mind. That it was me trashing my room. It was me running throughout the house at night and slamming things. Finally, my mom was home alone, and she realized I was right. I was away with a friend, and my sisters were at my grandma's, and my dad was at work. My mom calls me, and she is furious. My room is destroyed, and in order for me to even be away with my friends, my room had to be cleaned. I told her to please pick up everything. Didn't matter where it went, just to believe me. She did so after yelling at me the whole time. That night she calls me panicking because everything she cleaned up was all over the room again. My mattress on the floor, drawers opened, clothes everywhere. Now's your turn to yell at her. My mom decided we would get the room blessed. We did. And honestly, after that, it chilled. We, in a sense, coexisted. Fast forward years later. I'm moving out, and my younger sister is still living there with my parents. Quick backstory of my sister is her choices are poor. Very, very poor. She brought home a man from jail, and he is a walking red flag. Why parents allowed her to move this guy in surprises me, but I digress. So after a week of this man moving in, my mom calls me and says, "The boy is acting up." I asked how. And she said that since my sister's boyfriend moved in, he's just angry. He's throwing things, slamming things, running up and down the halls again, just back to square one. And it's been like a good 15 years since he acted up, so why now? My sister's boyfriend taunted this ghost, calling him names, calling us pathetic for thinking this boy is tough and he's nothing. Just putting all this negative energy and stirring things up. My dad called me one morning, just a regular phone call, so I thought. But you could hear something was just off about his voice. I asked if he was okay, and he said, "I need you to listen to me. I need you to really listen and then tell me I'm not crazy. The other night I just woke up because the boy was banging on the wall. But it was like it only woke me up, because your mom usually hears him before I do." I waited for him to continue because he took a big pause and again said to please listen, and he isn't crazy. He proceeded to tell me my sister's boyfriend was going back to their bedroom, and he could see the 5'5" man walk to the back room, but behind him was a giant shadow that he even saw duck to go through the bedroom door. He lay there for a while thinking he was dreaming because in that moment he felt crazy. He went to the bathroom, and he just glanced into their room, and the door was open, and there was the shadow. In the corner, on the boyfriend's side of the bed, just standing there. He turned the hall light on, and it was gone. He shut it off, and it was there. The slamming in the opposite room continued as if the boy was trying to tell him it was there. 2 months later there was a situation, and sister's boyfriend was kicked out. The noises from the boy stopped. Things genuinely settled the 3 days the boyfriend was gone. Well, I had to take my mom to a doctor's appointment one Wednesday. She was with me all day, as she is handicapped. After a long day, I dropped her off at home, got her situated with the bathroom, a snack, water, and her medication, and left her because my dad would be home in an hour and she wanted a nap. After I returned home, my mom called me. She said, "There's something wrong. The boy is making noise. He won't let me sleep. He's throwing things and slamming things." I asked if I needed to go get her. She said no, that my dad would be home soon, and she just needed to rest. My mom started to doze off, and she heard slamming, woke up, and tried staying awake. But when she is out all day, like she was, it's hard on her. She dozed off. She then was awoken from footsteps running down the hall, and a voice that said, "Don't go to sleep, wake up," and it sounded like hands clapping in her face. She woke up and stood awake. She calls me, and I'm ready to head over. But my dad just walked in, and she's explaining in tears what happened, because it's never gotten to that. We've never heard a voice come from this boy. After my dad calms her down, he goes to change his clothes. As he walks past the hallway to remove his work boots, out of habit, he looked down the hall, and there was a shadow. Shadows are obviously nothing new in this house, but it looked familiar. Sister's boyfriend was in the hallway with a baseball bat, waiting for my dad. My dad is okay. That man is back in jail. But I always wonder now if the boy was protecting my parents. We just coexisted for so long, maybe he felt like he needed to protect us. Anyway, I thank you for taking the time to listen to my rambling, crazy story. Story number 2, The Old Radio Station, by Sticker Peeler 805. When I was in my early 20s, I worked for an electronics repair and supply business. It was in an old cinder block industrial building that had a large warehouse space and workshop on the ground floor, and offices and other rooms upstairs. It was kind of a dusty, grimy building with an asphalt parking lot with potholes and cracks, and sat at the end of a dead-end street in a dingy neighborhood of mixed residential and commercial properties. The owner was a middle-aged guy, kind of sloppy, with a graying beard that he had because he couldn't be bothered to shave. His hair-grooming philosophy was similar. He was a brilliant guy, but a bit unfocused. He managed to stay in business because he was very talented at what he did, but definitely in spite of his business acumen. The building had a separate suite that had once been an FM radio station. It wasn't part of the business I worked for, but my boss had a set of keys to it, and it had been abandoned for years. There was still a faded, yellowing sign by the door with the station's letters. A lot of the furniture and equipment was still inside. My boss would frequently go to customer sites to do on-site repairs, or to deliver or pick up equipment, so I was there by myself a lot. I always loved having the place to myself and never felt nervous or creeped out by the building. There was a lot of cool stuff there, old junk that my boss had accumulated over the years, working and non-working. There was also the radio station. We weren't really supposed to go in there, as it wasn't part of my boss's space, but the landlord would occasionally have him check on it as he lived out of town. Naturally, being curious and fascinated by the allure of an abandoned radio station, I would frequently sneak in when I was unsupervised. I loved the old equipment. There were racks of transmitter equipment, power supplies, cables, some shelves, with several large glass vacuum tubes, tape machines, mixers, and racks of tape cartridges. There was a little media library with still quite a few records and boxes of reel-to-reel tapes from the 60s and 70s. There were a lot of promotional materials and file cabinets filled with licensing paperwork, advertising contracts, old utility bills, etc., etc. Although dusty and a bit worn and run down, the place was mostly intact, and was a very cool time capsule of a place. My favorite part was the broadcast booth. That's where the DJ sat, and there was still a microphone on an articulated boom that extended from the wall, There was a control board with buttons, knobs, and faders, 2 turntables, an old multi-line telephone, and a few tape machines. Power was shut off in the radio station, but there were windows, so there was plenty of light. I used to love going into the DJ booth and sitting in the old office chair and imagining what it must have been like to sit there talking and playing records there decades ago. I took a few souvenirs home with me. Some station sales materials and a few tape reels and boxes that I thought were cool. Other than that, I was very careful to leave the place exactly as I found it. One cold, cloudy winter afternoon, I was finishing up processing repair orders, calling customers to let them know their stuff was ready, checking paperwork and the like. My boss left to deliver a repair return and asked me to lock up and turn out the lights when I was done. I didn't have much to do, so not long after he left I made my way into the radio station. It was a cold, damp day. It was late afternoon and starting to get dark. I was sitting in the DJ chair reading a station log from the fading light that filtered in through the spotty, dirty windows, when I heard a sound. It kind of sounded like a door closing, so my first thought was that my boss had come back and was looking for me. I quickly jumped up and walked out of the booth and into the office entryway area, but no one was there, and the door to the outside was closed. As I stood there puzzling over what had made the noise, I heard a sharp, loud pop from the equipment room, which was down a short hallway and through a door. I was a little startled and uneasy at this point, and was sure that someone else was in the station with me. I nervously called out, "Hello? Dan?" My boss's name was Dan. Nothing. No reply. My heart was pounding at this point. The sound I heard was loud and sudden, like a single clap or a balloon popping. I mustered up the courage to walk down the darkening hallway to the equipment room and slowly opened the door. Immediately I saw glass fragments on the floor. Looking further, I saw that one of the large glass vacuum tubes had somehow come off a shelf and shattered on the floor. The metal base of the bulb lay surrounded by numerous curved shards of glass and little bits of metal pieces. That freaked me out, because there was no way that the tube had rolled or slid on its own. The shelf was wide and deep and sturdy. The stuff in there had been sitting undisturbed for years and all of a sudden falls off while I'm sitting in the station? I could feel the air in my arms stand up. Now I was seriously creeped out. I suddenly felt like I wasn't alone and something wasn't right. Time to go. I turned around and walked out of the equipment room and started to walk up the little hallway and toward the front office. On the right was a window into the DJ booth, with a partially obstructed view of where the DJ sat. The chair that I had been sitting in when I heard the first noises. Someone was sitting in the chair. I very clearly saw their shirt and one sleeve, their elbow on the desk. I remember I could clearly see the buttons on the shirt. I froze. The person was motionless. I couldn't see the rest of them because the console, desk, and a filing cabinet obstructed my view. But I could see someone sitting there. It scared the heck out of me because I knew it wasn't my boss, and the door to the station was locked. I knew that I couldn't just run out and leave him in there, so I just decided to confront them. I mustered my courage and opened the door to the DJ booth. Nothing. No one at all. The chair was empty. I looked all around the station and even opened the door and went outside to look. No one at all. It was starting to get dark, and I was really frightened at that point. I quickly secured the outside door, went back downstairs to the workshop, turned out the lights, and got the hell out of there. I never told my boss about it. I didn't go back in there alone after that. It was a very unsettling experience. It just gave me the feeling that there was a presence there that didn't appreciate my intrusions, and that I should just leave it be. It was a cool place, though, and I think about it a lot. And story number 3 is Weird Experience During the Solstice, and a helper advice by Cecil Kanagawa. Hello. Me and my best friend celebrate our individual forms of spirituality that are probably best aligned with paganism. We went out last night at just before sunset to a forest to celebrate the solstice, and we had a really frightening experience. We split up at a crossroads to spend time individually, and as soon as we did, things began to get extremely strange. We both started seeing a great deal of animals running from the directions we were walking to in pairs. 2 frogs, 2 crows, 2 rabbits, 2 dragonflies. Until we both ended up at a lake. We'd both gone in opposite directions, but we both ended up at the same lake at the same time, but couldn't see one another. As soon as I sat down, I began to get covered in mosquitoes to a degree that was genuinely surreal. Today I'm completely covered in bites. I had tens of them on my body at once. It was horrifying. I walked away from the lake and traveled toward an area where my friend, who had also left the lake by that point, had moved to, where they then watched me walk right back down a different path to the lake like I was being called to it. They told me not to go because they had such an intense feeling of dread about it, and then left, and I started to walk away from that direction too. As I did, a man walked from the direction of the lake who was completely covered by his clothes. He was wearing a sort of hoodie-esque thing, with the hood pulled up all the way down to his chin, and baggy or loose trousers, or possibly a skirt. I couldn't see any part of his body, just clothes. And he didn't react at all to the sound of me moving or the sound of my cane squeaking. It was like I wasn't even there. I then left and went to sit near where I'd found my friend, and was attacked by mosquitoes again, and felt such a horrible feeling that I texted them to ask if we could leave, which they replied to and immediately said sure, and that they'd just seen me so they could come find me. They hadn't, so we both get lost in the woods trying to find each other, and agreed to put our torches on to look for each other. I ended up finding what I believed was him, but it was just a random lamppost hidden behind a tree. I was too frightened to keep going, so I stayed near there until he found me, where we then immediately left. The whole walk home, I felt a presence over us, tall and man-shaped, and the second we got in, we salted the entryway and said in no uncertain terms we didn't want any part of that. Unfortunately, we then thought it might be a good idea to read tarot to see what was happening, and the second we started, a bunch of things fell from a wall directly at my friend that was reading the tarot. So we apologized, and resolved to leave the spirits alone for that night. On my friend's side of things, there isn't too much to add that wasn't already said earlier, but when I was on my own, around the aforementioned lake, I felt the most intense dread and feeling of being unwelcome that I have probably ever felt. As previously mentioned, when I was walking down the lake right after we split up, I saw numerous creatures that seemed to be an active escape of something, including a fox. It is worth mentioning that we live in the UK, and there are no large predators for us to be afraid of. This didn't strike me as too odd, so I carried on my walk at a much quicker pace, as the longer I was there, the more feeling of intense dread started to build. I left a small offering around the lake and started to leave, but as soon as I left, I felt 10 times worse, like I'd made an extremely bad decision in leaving the offering. Eventually, I found myself where the paths split, one path leading out and another staying sort of in the woods. The next day, the sky was completely covered by trees on the second path, but last night, when I was there, I had a clear view of the sky and the sunset. My boyfriend reminded me this morning that the sun was setting in a completely different direction. After that, I decided to stay out of the trees and stay in the field next to the woods and told my friend not to go in there. Whilst sat in the grass, I saw my friend walking down a path I'd been down, and a moment later received a message asking if we could leave. Thinking I'd just seen my friend, I went where I thought I'd seen them and couldn't find them. Eventually, we met up again and got home as quickly as possible. We went back the next day to check it out and realized the things that happened can't be explained by anything natural. As said above, the path showing the sky the next day was completely covered by trees, and after walking around the entirety of the lake, we could not find the place where I'd been attacked by mosquitoes. It's like that part of the lake didn't exist. We could see where it should have been, but it was completely covered with tall grass and no opening. Does anyone have any experience with anything like this? Any advice? Okay, story number 4 is The Yellow House by Worth Biscotti 5070. When I was around 14 or 15, my dad, little brother, and grandparents took a road trip from our home in Texas to Tennessee to visit family. We stayed at this charming little bed and breakfast, back before Airbnb was even a thing. It was an old yellow Victorian house perched on a hill, with a river winding through the backyard. I still remember how cozy it felt. The inside had delicate pink wallpaper, creaky wooden floors, and this gorgeous clawfoot tub in the bathroom. One of those places where the hosts live next door and make you breakfast in the morning. I loved it immediately. When we weren't with our relatives, my little brother and I spent our time exploring the grounds, skipping rocks and splashing around in the shallow parts of the river. It was peaceful, quiet in the way old places sometimes are, like the air itself had settled long ago. That night, after a long day of hiking and visiting, we all turned in early. My brother made a pallet on the floor in my grandparents' room. I was in my dad's room, on a metal folding cot on the foot of his bed. I remember how heavy my limbs felt. I barely managed to pull the covers over myself before I was out cold. I don't even remember my dad turning off the light. Sometime later I woke up. There was no sudden noise, no breeze, just I was awake. I blinked a few times, adjusting to the dim lights spilling in through the thin curtains. At first, everything seemed completely normal. I could see the room in perfect detail. Dad was still sleeping, his wallet and belt were on the dresser, just like before. My jacket was still hanging on the hook above my shoes near the door. Nothing had moved. I wasn't sure why I'd woken up. Maybe I needed a drink of water or to use the bathroom, but as I tried to move, I realized I couldn't. Not even a finger. I remember this creeping feeling in my chest, like a cold knot tightening. I tried again, harder. Nothing. My arms were lead, my legs wouldn't respond. I couldn't even turn my head. I wasn't dreaming. I could see everything. Every shadow, every detail, the stillness in the room felt wrong. Like time had slowed but hadn't stopped. This sounds like sleep paralysis. That's when I noticed them. 2 figures, short, maybe 3 to 4 feet tall, stood silently beside my dad's bed. They hadn't been there before. I would have noticed. They weren't human. Their bodies were dark green but shimmered strangely in the light, almost glittery. Their heads were elongated, shaped kind of like the aliens from Alien vs. Predator. But this was years before I ever saw those movies. When I did finally watch them, I remember freezing, the memory crashing back like a wave. These figures looked just like that, tall, narrow skulls with no visible mouth or eyes. At least not in the way we have them. Each of them held something, tools or weapons, I couldn't tell. They were the same green glittery color, shaped like guns but smoother, like they'd been carved from the same strange material as their bodies. They didn't speak aloud, but I could still hear them, like they were placing the thoughts directly into my mind. One of them, standing closest to my dad, said, "Okay, now we just need this one." The other replied, "I've already done the 2 in the other room." I felt my heart start to pound in my chest. My grandparents. My little brother. The second one turned toward me. "What about this one?" it asked. The first one sounded irritated. "We don't need that one. You know that. Just the males." It was so casual, dismissive, like I was just extra. But the second one didn't stop looking at me. "It can see us." The first one shrugged. "It doesn't matter. But hurry up and do it if you must." And then the second one began walking toward me. I was screaming inside. Every part of me wanted to run, to scream, to throw something, but I was frozen. Completely helpless. All I could do was stare as this thing approached me. Calm and silent. And I swear it smiled just a little, like it enjoyed that I was afraid. I fought harder than I have ever fought in my life to move, to blink, to make a sound, but nothing happened. And then, nothing. The next thing I remember was sunlight coming through the window. My body was drenched in sweat. I felt like I hadn't slept at all, like I'd been awake the whole night, trapped in that room, in that moment. I tried to tell my family I'd had a weird dream, but no one had experienced anything strange. No one believed me. We stayed at that house for a few more days, and I barely slept another hour while we were there. I kept waiting for something else to happen, but it didn't. Still, I couldn't have been more relieved when we packed up and drove away. It's been nearly 25 years since that trip, but I can still picture every inch of that room, the wallpaper, the exact hook my jacket hung from, my dad's belt buckle on the dresser, and them, the way they looked, the sound of their voices in my head. I've had dreams since then, nightmares sometimes, but nothing has ever felt as real as that night in that little yellow house. Because I don't think it was a dream. Okay, fifth and final story is I lived in a haunted apartment, and I need an explanation, by Vondexville Vondo. I don't believe in the paranormal, and even after this story, I still don't. I believe there's a scientific explanation that I'm not getting, which is why I'm posting this here. I just want a scientific explanation to the stuff that happened to me in that apartment. So a few years ago, I lived in a fairly small apartment with my family, and around 2021 or 2022, some weird occurrence kept happening right after each other. On their own, most of them could be easily explained away, except for one, which is the reason I'm making this post. But the fact that they happened immediately after each other was pretty weird, and I will try to put them down. The first thing that happened was pretty normal, but just because it happened closely with the other stuff, I may as well count it as paranormal. My cat is extremely lazy. He barely moves at all, or makes a sound. He can go for hours just laying in one spot and not moving. Lazy is just conserving energy for the right moment while attack. But one day, he was just staring at the empty bathroom, and he kept meowing as loud as possible for like a minute, then ran quickly to my mom's bedroom and hid under the bed for the rest of the day. Again, this is pretty normal, especially if you own cats. Cats just do that sometimes. But again, it happened closely to the paranormal stuff, so I put it here. My uncle was a smoker back then, and he'd usually go to the balcony to smoke a cigarette, and he'd close the door so the smoke didn't get in. The very next day, after the cat thing, he went to smoke on the balcony as usual, and I was in the living room, and a few minutes later he came out of the balcony looking confused and asked me if I had opened the balcony door. He said that he was sure he'd closed it, but when he went back he found it wide open. This one is pretty normal too. My uncle just forgot to close the door, though he isn't the kind to forget about stuff, but I guess it happens. The next day I woke up early to go to school. I brushed my teeth and washed my face, and when I went back to my bedroom, the doorknob moved on its own pretty quickly and unnaturally. Then the door opened slowly. Now honestly, I don't know what scientific explanation to give this one. My best guess is that since I put clothing on the back of the door, and with how fast the doorknob moved, maybe a heavy piece of clothing fell on the doorknob coincidentally as I was in front of the door, and so the door just opened. But if so, then the door shouldn't have opened if there was something so heavy it moved the metal doorknob that fell on the floor, then logically it should also have prevented the door from opening, and even if it did, I surely would have noticed it. Not to mention, all the windows were closed at the same time, so it wouldn't have been the wind. It feels like there's a scientific explanation for this one, but I'm either missing something or not understanding it. If you have any explanation, please tell me. The same day I came back from school, and my grandma told me that the stove lit up on its own. Now usually you need to turn the gas on, and then hold a match near it to light it up. Now, I haven't seen this one myself, and I'm just going off by what my grandma told me, and I don't know anything about stoves, so my guess is that there was some kind of gas leak. And finally, the next day, me and my mom stayed up late. I believe it was 3 a.m., and we were sitting on the couch in the living room, talking and making jokes quietly so we don't wake up my grandma and my uncle. And while we were talking, we heard a third voice say something. It sounded like someone who was right in front of us whispered something related to what we were talking about. We didn't quite hear what they said, but it sounded like someone had commented on what we were saying. To me, it sounded like a child whispering, but my mom says it sounded like a grown woman whispering. Honestly, I can't think of a good explanation for that at all. We were very quiet to not wake up my grandma and uncle, and the walls of the apartment were soundproof, so it couldn't have been the neighbors. And again, the voice came from right in front of us, and I didn't hallucinate it because my mom heard it too, and she remembers to this day. And after that, everything just went back to normal. Like for 3 or 4 days straight, weird stuff kept happening, and then it stopped. I really want a scientific explanation for some of this stuff to understand it. Again, I don't believe in the paranormal, and believe there is a non-supernatural explanation to that stuff, so if you have an explanation for anything, please comment on it. I mean, the whispering could easily just be somebody going by outside, your grandmother talking in her sleep, something like that. Very likely to be one of those two, actually. The doors opening on their own, I mean, it's easy to close a door and think it's closed, and even if a window wasn't open, it doesn't mean the wind wasn't coming from somewhere. Whether it's through the vents or some other way. Maybe there was a door open. Easy enough to create a current like that. Who knows? It's all just speculation, really. And as you say, the cat stuff, that's just cats being cats. Okay. And that's everything for now. Big thanks to everyone who allowed me to use their stories. If you'd like to support the channel, you can sign up for my Patreon page, which is linked in the description. $1 or more gets you early access to all the videos at once on Monday. You'll also find there's a link in the description to my merchandise store over on Teespring, as well as my Discord server, my Threads account, and my email, which is kingofthecities@gmail.com. That's everything for now, so until next time, thank you very much for watching, and take very good care of yourselves. Bye bye.